Hi, my name is Akshay Iyer, and today, in the next 35 minutes, I'm going to tell you about why it's important to tell the story of our product to our customers. Let's take a quick look at the agenda for the next 35 minutes. Since this is a session on storytelling, I want to begin by telling you the story of my journey in the world of content. The next thing we'll do is look at the power of storytelling. We'll look at a few psychologists, psychiatrists who have researched on this subject and told us why this is so important. Then we'll move on to looking at the business of software. Why is this in a session about storytelling? Because I want to help you understand that if you tell the story of your product well, you actually help sell the product a lot better. The next thing we'll do is look at the story of my product, because that's how I want to introduce you so that we can have a relevant example. Then we'll look at how Pixar has been telling stories and what we can learn from them so that we can tell realistic, authentic stories about our product. The next thing we'll focus on is the power of Lego blocks, because the same set of Lego blocks can be assembled to create so many structures. We'll see how we can do some of that with our own content so that the same things can be consumed in different ways. The last thing I'll leave you with is some lessons I've learned and some next steps you can take to help tell the story of your own product. Let's start with my story. I have a bachelor's degree in information technology engineering, which meant I spent 4 years studying it. However, most of the time I was in the last bench reading Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, or a few other fantastic fantasy fiction novels. I trained as an instructional designer in NIIT, but quickly moved on to Symantec, where I designed content for the technical support team. I spent a few years in Symantec and then went on to BMC, where I set up their India education team and managed the Remedy curriculum, which was a $5 million curriculum. But from Symantec, where I was learning about how to create training content for support guys, I was now suddenly managing content for paying customers who were paying top dollar to ensure they learned how to use our product. I spent about 5 years in BMC and then came to CA Technologies, where I set up their partner enablement team. Our focus was creating curriculum for pre-sales and partners. So now suddenly in the content world, I had learned how to create training for support guys, then went on to create training for customers. And now we were creating training for pre-sales and partners who are actually selling the product to those customers. So I started having a 360-degree view of content for the same product. As I worked with these different kinds of content, I realized the most important content for the product is actually the documentation. Many people were sourcing different pieces of information from there and putting it together to tell different stories for different audiences. So naturally, I moved on to the documentation side of it after a few years. And that's where I've been for the last couple of years, trying to unify all of the things that I've learned to create a holistic experience for our customers. So why am I telling you about storytelling? It all started when I joined the technical documentation team a couple of years ago. My product Clarity had gone through a massive transformation. A 20-year-old product suddenly had a new user interface, it had fantastic new use cases, and it was helping organizations transform their businesses to meet the digital economy. How do we tell the story of the product? Traditionally, we had product management presenting it to customers, we had marketing creating a few white papers and a few 3-minute videos. But as I was listening to product management talk about it, I realized that we needed to create a sustainable way to tell the story of the product. I created a video series, which was a series of 7 videos, and we put it out on YouTube, and things worked really well for us. The pre-sales team started asking customers to look at the videos to understand the power of the product. Our customer success team started sharing it with customers so that the product could be adopted better, and product managers and support started using it to deflect basic queries on how the product could be used. Our playlist gathered over 8,000 views in a few months, and I realized we have stumbled onto something good. What was interesting was this wasn't a video series that told someone how to use the product. That was a byproduct. What we were really telling is how you could use the product to transform your business. It wasn't about click here and click there and press this button, but instead it was what are the significant challenges that come across when you transform a business, and how do you use a product to meet that challenges. In a sense, we told the story of why our product exists. If you still believe that I'm exaggerating about the importance of telling a story, let's try a small experiment. Think about the last time you gave a job interview. The interviewer asked you about your most successful project that you've completed. Did you just give them the bare facts of the project, or did you actually tell them a story about why that project was so important, why your role was so critical, and how the result helped your company? Think about the last time you actually told someone that you loved them. Did you just tell them some bare facts about how they were so important in your life and how you value their contribution? Or you told them a story about how they are the most important person in your life? Think about a time you explained your job to your parents. Was it a bare basic set of facts on where you sat and what you did? Or was it a story about how you work for a product or an organization or a company and how your role is crucial? Most importantly, think of your last appraisal meeting. Was it a purely fact-based discussion, or was it also you telling a story about what you have done over the last year, and your manager sometimes telling you a story of what you could do better? We do not live with only facts. Our brain is hardwired to listen and to tell stories. It's actually evolutionary, and evidence goes back thousands of years to cave paintings and to human beings sitting around fires telling each other stories. When I was doing pre-sales training for an organization, I happened to attend a session by Seth Godin, where he talked about why it's important we tell stories to our customers. He basically said that imagine your target persona is sitting and working at their desk and they are using your product. Their boss comes over and asks them what's happening. Do you think that person will narrate the series of clicks they did on your product, or turn around and say, I just managed to save us $300,000 because I found a more efficient way of doing this? Your target user is always going to use your product to tell the story of how they were successful. The question is, are you telling them a story of the best way to use your product so that's easier for them to tell the story of their success? Now that you understand the importance of storytelling, let's look at what are the stories that get told in the software business. Let's start with on-premise software. Most companies looking to buy large on-premise software typically issue an RFP or a request for proposals. Multiple organizations bid for those deals and conduct proof of concepts. Typically, the sales team for organizations lead this opportunity, and the pre-sales teams talk to the customer to figure out what's the outcome they want to achieve. Then they go ahead and demonstrate the use cases for the product and show them how their product can actually help this organization achieve and exceed its objectives. Through the POCs, the pre-sales team is actually telling the story of how a product helps the company achieve an objective. There are typically 15-20 people in a room. The companies that tell the best story and offer the best price typically win the deal, and most of them are 3-year deals. Customers typically spend 3 to 6 months installing the software and start getting value typically after an year of paying the money for buying the software in the first place. Remember, there were only 20 people in a room trying to sit and evaluate a product, but there are thousands of customers who will actually start using the product in the organization once it gets deployed. The story that the pre-sales team worked so hard on telling was told only to 20 people. When these thousands of people start coming in and start using the product and trying to deliver the value for the organization, most of them haven't heard the story you told them. So they rely on documentation, they rely on training, or all the other material that is publicly available. We write most of this content, don't we? And we know we don't really do a good job of telling the story of the product. We focus too much on the feature, the function, the things that can go wrong, how to set up things and configure things. Are you starting to see a disconnect? An organization spends a lot of money buying what they think is the best product for their employees to use. The employees don't really understand how they can best use the product because it's hard for them to get the story or the value the organization was looking for. And that's why when these products come up for renewals 3 years later, most employees go back and give feedback saying they weren't too happy with the purchase in the first place. That's why a lot of on-premise products end up as what's called shelfware, where they are bought but never really deployed or used. The people who are using the product cannot really articulate how the product's going to help them tell the right story. The SaaS business has a very different model, but an ever-increased reliance on storytelling. Typically, a person starts by Googling how they can solve a problem. Let's say how they can do load tests. They read a series of blogs that may be authored by products who are solving that problem, and they start using a free trial. They find the experience great, but to actually use the product at scale, they need a paid version. So they go to their manager or the procurement team and ask for money. That's where it's so important that the story that they are telling these guys is authentic and actually captures the value the product can offer to any organization. Now that we understand how storytelling can impact the traditional on-premise and SaaS business models, let me tell you how we arrived at a story for clarity. Every product has certain key modules through which data flows to help customers achieve an outcome. I started my journey of understanding Clarity's story by understanding each module in the product. I focused on what users could do in that module and why it was critical to the product. Traditionally, when we create documentation, we explain that Clarity is made up of the following modules. Custom investments help you create investments that follow the terminology of your organization versus following industry standard terms such as projects or ideas. Roadmaps help you meet the need of many stakeholders involved in strategic management and planning. Demand management allows you to capture the demand from new ideas throughout your organization. Project management allows you to successfully initiate, plan, design, execute, and monitor a project. Let me not go on, you get the gist. We define each module in terms of the functionality it offers the customer. While it's not incorrect, it's very difficult for any user who's starting out with the product to figure out their role in helping digitally transform a business. That's why I interviewed product management, marketing, and pre-sales teams to figure out how they engage with the customers. We understood the stories they told the customers, we refined it, and then we came up with the following narrative. Welcome to the Getting Started video series. I'm a Clarity product manager, and I'll help you understand how you can use our product to transform your business. Did you notice that we used a product manager as an ambassador? That vastly increased the authenticity associated with our series. Every transformation begins with a strategy. We'll use custom investments in Clarity so that you can collaborate and decide on a strategy for your organization. You can then break it down into measurable objectives. While you've broken it down into objectives, these still need to be validated with the executive team. Hence, we'll use roadmaps and Clarity so that you can review the objectives, align with each strategy, and define a budget associated with the outcome. Your leadership team can then approve these. Once you've communicated your strategy and objectives to your employees, they are going to have great ideas. You need to ensure these ideas are focused on how you can improve existing products and develop brand new ones. That's why we'll focus on how you can use Clarity to create a customizable lean canvas. Employees can then submit ideas. An idea is just a starting point. You can convert ideas to fully fledged projects so that you can track them, manage them, and ensure they're completed on time and on budget. A project will only be successful when you have the right resources associated with it. How do you find people with the right skills who have the time to work on your project? You will use the staffing module to find and allocate relevant resources to investments. A critical question you will often get asked is how much time is a resource actually spending on an investment and can they be used somewhere else? Timesheets and Clarity help you answer such questions. We follow a similar approach to explain all the other modules where we focus on how interconnected they are and how using them together helps you actually deliver transformation. Did you notice the difference between the two approaches? Our traditional approach was focusing on informing the user about the facts associated with the product. The second one was giving them a complete story about the product so they could create their own stories to present to their own management. Even if you're using one module of the product, you understood where it fit in context of the other ones. It did not matter if you were involved in the original POC or if you were told why exactly your organization bought the product. Our product story seems really simple, doesn't it? It's a straightforward story that explains the value of the product to the user. But everything simple takes a lot of effort. Every single person I talked to had a slightly different version of this story, and they highlighted different modules and their importance based on their engagement with their customers. I was trying to figure out how to create a cohesive story based on different inputs when I encountered a fantastic free course by Pixar on storytelling. It's on Khan Academy, you should check it out. Here are a few lessons I used from that to start shaping up my story. Pixar started by recommending that every author should share their own unique perspective. One writer talked about how he saw his father progressing through old age, and that inspired him to write the story Up. I realized that in my case, our product is the main character. Everything else has to be in service of the product. However, I did not personally know how our customers viewed and used Clarity too much. So how could I develop my own perspective? That's why I interviewed the pre-sales and the marketing teams to understand our customer stories. Based on the stories they told us, we concluded that we don't need to introduce any fictitious personas such as the CEOs or project managers or anybody else. That would just take the focus away from the product. We focused on the depth of the product and the customization it provided so that customers could get maximum value from it. Another recommendation by Pixar was to find answers to what if questions. That's how a lot of their movies came about. What if rats could cook? What if toys came alive? These questions are crucial when you design stories because they highlight business problems and solutions. Here are a few what if questions that I created for our product. What if you could successfully transform your business to succeed in a digital economy? That's a big deal because apparently only 11 to 12% of companies successfully make that transformation. What if you could create strategies and map every investment in your organization against that strategy? What if you could associate a budget against an outcome and get real-time data on how money was being spent every day? These questions became the foundations for the scenario that we created to tell the story of Clarity. The last thing that we focused on was obstacles. Pixar talked about how every character needs to overcome obstacles to reach their goal and grow. For example, Woody in Toy Story learned that he needed to share. Buzz learned that he needed humility. Their shared goal to get back home and the obstacles they overcame taught them these lessons. It's really similar when it comes to products. Organizations have certain obstacles, and that's why they need your product. A great example of an obstacle in our product's context was that the executive team has very less visibility into how each project or investment aligns against the organization's strategy. Another obstacle is that financial managers use multiple tools to figure out the actual spend on a project. It's expensive, it wastes time, it's not accurate. When we highlight how Clarity helps people overcome these obstacles, they instantly connect with the product. For example, executives can link investments to strategies to see the exact spend and budget allocated to each strategy. We realized that when we highlight such key obstacles and demonstrate how our product helps resolve them, the adoption automatically increases. I think I mentioned collaborating with pre-sales, marketing, and product management teams multiple times. It's critical because we cannot determine perspectives, what-if questions, and obstacles alone. These teams frequently work with customers and help us understand that story. Let's review what you can typically expect when you collaborate with these teams. The marketing team helps you understand the personas that use your product. For example, we knew that portfolio managers was a big focus for us. They also share who are the top decision makers in organizations that help purchase your product. That way you can ensure your WhatsApp scenarios are targeted to them. They also tell you whether your product is typically a top-down push or a bottom-up adoption product. There are many products where the organization mandates use for them, and there are some in which employees start using products and they naturally grow. It's really important for you to know which category you fall in so that you can actually tailor your scenarios and your story to address the right audience. Finally, they let you know the tone of your product. Is it casual? Is it slightly more formal? All of this kind of depends on the persona that you're targeting. Here are a few things we learned from a marketing team. Take a few seconds and read about them. The pre-sales team is fantastic when you want to figure out the business use cases that customers typically ask for when they evaluate your product. This helps you understand the key what-if questions and obstacles they face in their organization. If you review a few use case documents, you will automatically notice a trend. These trends help you determine the details to add into your stories. Remember, specificities make a lot of difference. Another critical thing you can get from your pre-sales team is a server with demo data on it. When you start shooting some demonstrations to actually show how your product's adding value, you want some rich demo data in it. You don't want a couple of fields because that really does not inspire confidence in customers. Pre-sales teams are fantastic because they have servers with pre-populated demo data. You will spend days, if not weeks, trying to create such rich data, and I'm not sure even in that case they will flow as consistently as they should. Here are a few things we got when we interviewed a pre-sales team. The last, but one of the most crucial teams you'll talk to is the product management team. They really help you understand how to position the product with the customer. Their session is generally more strategic than pre-sales, who focus on specific use cases. Product management may look at how industry trends are going, how they position the products differently to different industries, which are the key industries in which your product operates, and so on. They also help you validate your script to ensure your flow is correct, your what-if scenarios and obstacles are correct, and you're actually presenting the product in the right light. Here are a few things we noted when we interviewed our product management team. You have now understood the story of your product and you have a framework ready. Before you go ahead and start scripting content, I would encourage you to spend some time playing with Lego blocks. As you take the blocks apart and you create different shapes with the same blocks, you realize the same approach can work for content. You can create the right nugget once and use it at multiple places. What you see on your screen is the building blocks for the project management module in Clarity. Each content nugget is an independent piece. We can attach it to documentation, it can surface in in-app tools, in education courses, and in relevant support articles. Let's take a quick look at how we use the same content nuggets in different places. We decided to create a video series which was called Clarity Getting Started to tell the story of our product. This series is available independently on YouTube. Did you notice we also have other series published here, such as project management or resource management? We also reused the Clarity Getting Started videos in documentation. Let's take a quick look. They are used to provide additional context in the documentation and make it more interactive. Let me also show you how we built education content by using these videos. We built something called as the Clarity University, where every user who registered gets access to the Clarity Getting Started course. It's automatically assigned to them. There are additional interactivities that flesh out the what-if scenarios, that flesh out the challenges customers meet, and tell them how our product can be used to address these challenges. The really fun part is once we had our basic building blocks ready, it took us very little time to actually create all of these additional outcomes because we exactly knew how to bundle them up together to achieve different goals. You are now ready to start creating the stories around your product. Let me make this journey easier for you by sharing a few lessons that we learned. We initially planned to use Amazon Polly or other text-to-speech software. However, marketing gave us some really interesting feedback. They said customers are coming back and saying that if you're making it, then invest enough to have a human being speak. So we switched and collaborated with one of our product managers who gave her voice to the series. Since marketing planned to leverage these videos to target decision maker personas, they did not want us to use text-to-speech, and that decision paid off in the long term. We decided to embrace first-person narrative, where Catherine, our product manager from Clarity, would narrate the story of the product. When I tried to script it using different personas such as a product manager or a financial manager, I realized the focus was moving away from the product to the persona. Since the product is the main character in this narrative, we ensured we focused on it. We used some really great free stock videos from Pixar to set up the context for each story. It helped us in creating much more professional videos. We used Catherine, one of our product managers, as the mascot for our series. People got used to hearing our voice, and it lent a lot of authenticity to the whole series. I would suggest you choose a mascot for your product if possible and you stick to them. If you are thinking, all this sounds fine, but where do I get the time to do all of this? This is a question I get asked very often. I can give you my answers. Just try and figure out if they work for you. I honestly don't attend most of the meetings I'm invited to. Agile ceremonies are great, but they are primarily designed for engineering teams to collaborate and make technical choices. I typically catch up with product owners or product managers once a week and download all the key discussions that happened. I avoid continuously tweaking things that are already good enough. I'm honest about the actual documentation work needed for a release. My product ships once in 3 months. The first 2 sprints are back-end engineering work with minimal customer impact. That gives me typically a month. The last sprint is mainly innovation and code hardening. That's a couple of other weeks. I typically need 1 week of effort for 1 month of engineering effort. That's how I calculate my numbers and estimate what I can do over a particular release. You can make your own calculations based on your scenarios. The first video will always be hard. If you're not rewriting it multiple times, you're probably not there yet. Just remember, it gets a lot easier with practice. I know this is a lot of information, and I'm sharing things with you that I've learned across 4 jobs and multiple domains. However, the software development industry is going through a tectonic shift. Everyone involved is constantly learning new skills. I've seen developers start by writing automated test cases. Now they're specializing in DevOps and containerization. The importance of product management roles has multiplied over the years, and they are constantly learning new things. The QA teams are looking at new automation tools. So similarly, the content domain is now opening up, and I think content is the most critical piece that can enable adoption or actively hinder it. We no longer need to look at our work as being limited to one domain. I was trained in instructional design, learned digital marketing, and now technical writing. I did all of this in my own time because I believe that these skills will complement each other and help me create a significantly better content outcome. I wanted to share all of this with everyone because I believe that as writers, our tribe can go far and do much more. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Akshay Iyer. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to talk to any of you even after this conference is done.
Akshay, welcome to the Q&A.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
It's great to have you. So let's have a look at some of the questions coming through. We did have some questions asked by folks. So one of them was a subject that I think is pretty close to my heart as well. It relates to open source. So do you think storytelling is important for open source products as well? Because I think often in open source, the community learns and uses the product based on their hands-on experience without really having to worry about budget. So where do you think it sort of fits?
I think one of the big fitment is adoption of open source products, right? So there are a ton of really great open source products that sometimes are unable to compete with the large products out there, which offer similar functionality, are sometimes packaged better or look better. And one of the big things, storytelling is not about the jazz part of it, right? I mean, let's forget the stock videos, let's forget whatever, right? It can just be a single paper that's saying, these are the 15 things that are cool. This is the narrative that binds them together. As a challenge, can you do these 5 tasks and just put a tick mark next to it, which basically what you're telling your user is why you've built the product and how they can derive value from it. It can be 1 line, it can be 15 lines, it can be a series of 10 videos, or whatever it is for you, right? But human beings communicate via stories. And if you can tell it in whichever way possible, I think it just accelerates adoption.
Yeah, for sure. I think your point about we were talking just before the session started, and we were talking about the fact of what motivates you to actually use a product in the first place. And it doesn't matter whether it's open source or whether it's commercial or SaaS-based product. It's about the jobs to be done, isn't it? Or the tasks that you're trying to solve, the problems you've got as a user that you're trying to actually solve. And open source projects and products still solve that problem. They just don't often have a monetary value attached to them. So yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah, storytelling is definitely still valid, isn't it?
And think about it like this, right? I mean, if you want to go and tell let's say you're used an open source product, you've saved your company money, right? That's one of the best use cases for it. What you want to go and you don't go and tell your boss, I used that product and then I did these tasks, right? What you're telling them is, how did you add business value? And if that open source products makes it really simple for you to do that, to a point where they even give you a template to say, fill in these 5 details and just hand it over and say, this is what I did for you, right? Those are fantastic things you can just do to accelerate adoption.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, here's another interesting question. Are you ever frowned upon by SMEs when you propose to add storytelling to docs?
Here's the fun part, right? My SMEs love it.
Oh, yeah.
Simply because, what I try and tell them, one, I take up very little of their time. SMEs hate when you leech too much time off them, right? Most of them love to code. Most of them love to do their jobs. And when you kind of spend too much time with them, they resist it. So I do all my homework. I actually make many of these and just tell them, can you give a quick pass? You built a fantastic feature. Does this tell the story that you wanted to tell your customers, right? So I typically don't ask for permission. I do all the homework. I make it good looking and just tell them, is there something you want to change about it? And they come back with some great suggestions. But I have not met a single engineer, product manager, pre-sales guy, anyone attached to the product who said, why did you do this?
Right. That's pretty good. I think they just need to see it in practice, don't they, really, to sort of get it if they've never seen the concept before.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's really true. So we've got one other question here, and then I'll switch back to the Q&A just in case people jump them in really quickly after I'm reading this one through. But what's some strategies you can use to counter opposition to storytelling for systems that are really flexible. You know, there might be a time when someone says, you know, we don't want to tell a story because, you know, our users might think that's the only thing they can do. How do you sort of work around those sort of problems when you're weaving a story into a product?
Awesome. And that's why I think the amount of work that you do on the design upfront matters, right? So I have always looked at when you're writing a story, what you're really doing is you're starting wide so that you can kind of encounter the whole breadth of a problem. And then you go block, 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 like a Lego, and assemble the whole thing together. And while you're doing that, for every story, you're also going very clear to say this is just a use case that we've used. And there are many other things that you can do with it, right? But the opposition to, so the question I ask people when they tell me this is, what is the damage of not telling a story? Because when you don't tell a story, what you're really doing is you're leaving it to your user to guess how they can do things, or you're comfortable with the idea that if it's not broken, don't fix it. Well, that's essentially, you wouldn't have Tesla with electric cars, or we would still be riding horses, right? Human transportation.
That's right.
Evolved that way. So my typical point of view is, I'm not asking you for help. I'm not asking you for things, right? I own it. I'll get it done. All I need you to tell me is, does it work technically or not? And then if we have data points that say it doesn't make sense here, then we'll abandon it.
Fair enough. It seems like that when you're actually, you know, trying to work around that problem of resistance, it's almost like, well, no, it may be a flexible system, but we don't have to cover every use case. We just need to cover the ones that matter.
One, we have to cover the ones that matter. And two, if you don't cover any of the use cases, which is what many sets look like currently, right? If you have data that measures drop-off rates, which SaaS does very well, right? Where you are able to see a customer downloaded a product, didn't use it. So when we looked at pre-sales data that said, here are the amount of customers who bought the products that sat on a shelf, right? Why would it sit on a shelf? It's either because they were forced it as a part of a sale where they were buying something else, or somebody articulated a vision to 20 people and nobody else could kind of figure out what to do with it once they had it. So when we started approaching it from a data point of view, it started making a lot of sense. Especially when I tell people I don't need anything from you. If it doesn't work, it's my neck on the line. Most people are happy.
Okay, sure. Let's do that. Sure. Okay, we might have time for just one quick question here. This is the last one. So how far in the content do you think the story of the product should go? Like, how do you incorporate the larger story into a more specific technical or feature-focused articles or help docs? Is it more sort of service level, or do you go deep and actually try and get that story deeper?
Ideally, what you really want to do is your story flows consistently through your marketing docs, your product docs, your training material, whatever it is, right? Because you don't know where a customer's entry point is. And realistically, if you look at most of the content out there, like, there is a fundamental disconnect between marketing is telling customers we solve digital transformation issues, and documentation is telling them when you click the next button, the product will install. Then when you click this, a recovery point will be created and something else will happen, right? Like, I'm amazed that nobody's made more noise about it before. But it should go as deep as you can afford for it to go, right? As long as you can use stuff like data, where you can create separate conceptual elements so that you can pull in things and reuse content in a lot of great ways. You have videos that are modular, that don't have deep relationships with each other, but yet can combine and create this whole Lego block architecture. So it's information architecture. The better your architecture, the deeper it goes.
Great. Excellent response. Look, I think we might have to wrap it up there. It's been a really interesting session, Akshay. So thank you very much again. And
thank you. And sorry for all the grief people had with the stock things sometimes.
Oh no, I think it's great. I think the stock stuff is awesome. Yeah, it was fantastic. So yeah, thanks again for shaking up the way we do presentations. It was a really fresh take, and I think you might be seeing some iterations on yours down the track in the next year, perhaps.